When you press some key on the piano, you know that the sound you hear has no substantial reality, because that sound is just a wave generated by the vibration of the string when struck by the hammer. Sound appears when you strike the string, but notice that it fades away on its own without any further action. In other words, the sound is born, and then it decays. This principle forms the basis of Walter Russell's periodic chart, where the cycles of appearance and decay correspond to the rhythmic nature of matter and energy. Observe that the entire periodic chart is a manifestation of a single wave cycle, beginning with its birth in the space octaves, evolving toward maturity at carbon, and decaying back into space as manifested by the radioactive elements. Notice also that this grand periodic cycle is composed of smaller wave cycles, from the first octave to the last, each beginning with an inert gas, growing toward maturity, and decaying back to an inert gas at the end. There are no different kinds of waves, as we classify them in modern science. Waves vary only in dimensions, such as distance, area, volume, or time interval, but they do not vary in principle, nor do they vary in their energy constant. The same energy constant of the wave that creates the whole universe is reflected in the wave down to the smallest scale. What appears as variation is only an illusion. Low-octave elements, such as hydrogen for example, embody lower potential but cycle more rapidly, making them abundant throughout the universe. High-octave elements, such as gold, embody greater potential but form more slowly and under rarer conditions, which accounts for their scarcity. The greater the accumulation, the longer its periodic cycle. Since we repeatedly say waves have no variations, let us look upon a single wave. Modern science considers a full wave cycle to be from one crest to the next crest, or from one trough to the next trough. Russell argued that this view misrepresents the true nature of a wave. According to him, a single wave begins at a harmonic point, extends in opposite directions, and collides with neighboring waves that also originate from harmonic points. The collision point between harmonics is where carbon is formed. This is the point of highest pressure, which gives carbon its highest melting point. While inert gases are formed at the harmonic point, which is the point of lowest pressure. This gives elements such as helium their lowest melting point. Other elements are formed in between. According to Walter Russell, a wave cannot send its entire energy straight toward the amplitude due to resistance. Instead, it oscillates back and forth until the wave amplitude is reached. Notice, for example, that when you swing a pendulum sideways, it oscillates back and forth until it comes to a full stop when its energy is completely dissipated. If we reverse this process, we can visualize how a wave builds up toward its amplitude as it accumulates energy. This oscillation creates a series of alternating pressure zones, where elements are formed. These step-ups of energy are what Walter Russell referred to as lock potentials, expressed by this formula. According to him, these locking points follow a definite mathematical ratio. Lithium, for example, is formed in the first pressure zone at the +1 position with 512 units of volume. This is followed by beryllium, which is formed by compressing those 512 units into 64 units, and this marked +2 position. The volume decreases, but the pressure increases. Boron is then formed at +3 position by compressing its 64 units of volume into 8 units, further increasing the pressure. Carbon, situated at the wave crest at 4++ position, is compressed still further, from 8 units into 1, corresponding to its higher valency. Nitrogen is the opposite mate of boron. Oxygen is the opposite mate of beryllium. Fluorine is the opposite mate of lithium. They represent the locking points of energy stepping down on the female side. Carbon has no mate, for it is bisexual in nature. It is positioned at the point where gravity ends and radiation begins, while the inert gases occupy the opposite point, where radiation ends and gravity begins. The color arrangement reveals a fundamental polarity. The red side corresponds to elements that are predominantly generating, charging, or compressing toward appearance, moving away from inertia. In contrast, the blue side corresponds to elements that are predominantly degenerating, discharging, or expanding toward disappearance, returning back to inertia. Different colors indicate the position of an atom within its wave field, and Walter Russell suggested that color is one of the greatest dimensions we must consider. He further emphasized that the discovery of spectroscopy provided a profound leap forward in science. Walter Russell arranged his periodic chart not on the basis of atomic mass or atomic number, but purely on periodicity, the fundamental characteristic of a wave in its cycle of appearance, disappearance, and reappearance. Regardless of the pressure zone in which a wave emerges, it always conforms to this periodic law. Through this principle, he simplified the arrangement of elements across every octave: the lithium line, beryllium line, boron line, carbon line, nitrogen line, oxygen line, and fluorine line. All elements that fall within each respective line manifest similar characteristics. Walter Russell said that isotopes only begin to appear at the 7th octave, specifically between the 3rd and 4th pressure zones on both the male and female sides. He explained that isotopes are nature's record of successive efforts to reach the wave's amplitude position. As the pressure in the higher octaves increases, it becomes increasingly difficult to reach that point, and this difficulty is reflected in the growing number of isotopes from the 7th up to the 9th octave. This can be compared to a musician suddenly producing split tones when blowing harder into an instrument. Likewise, it is similar to a string pulled so tightly that it can barely vibrate enough to produce a clear tone. At the other extreme, in the lowest octave where pressure is too weak, it is also difficult to generate sufficient amplitude. Based on this understanding, hydrogen, which occupies 1 octave below carbon, cannot generate isotopes or split tones. According to Walter Russell, deuterium and tritium, commonly referred to as components of heavy water, are complete elements in their own right rather than isotopes of hydrogen. The difficulty in classifying them as separate elements arises from the fact that hydrogen has already been designated as the first element in the periodic table. Walter Russell also determined that some elements on the modern periodic table are out of place. He argued that hydrogen cannot be formed without an inert gas. In nature, everything grows from a seed, and inert gases are that seeds. Also, the modern periodic table has 3.5 octaves missing, and there are no elements that belong to the 8th group, because there are only 7 steps of energy, step up and step down. If you've stayed with me up to this point, then this last part is especially for you. Walter Russell wanted to clear up a huge misconception, the idea that energy is inside matter, and that it comes in little packets. He argued that matter itself has no energy. Matter is only an effect. The real energy, it's in the cause, and that's the part we need to understand. Imagine tossing a stone into a pond. What happens? Waves appear. But think about it. Those waves only register the energy of the stone hitting the water. And once that energy is fully dissipated, the pond naturally returns to its calm, balanced state. That's exactly what your thinking mind does to the one universal substance. Your thinking mind is the cause. All the elements on the periodic table are merely registrations of your thinking. The waves caused by your thoughts simulate reality, which therefore has no substantial reality of its own. They are the image-making faculty of your mind, as Walter Russell said. Your thoughts project, register as waves, and are reprojected back to you as sensed existence. When you play a single note on the piano, it begins with desire. First, you want to play that note. Once the desire is set, your brain activates, sending signals through your nerves to your muscles and fingers, causing them to contract. As your finger presses down, the piano key moves, lifting the hammer to strike the string. The string vibrates, setting the air molecules around it into alternating compression and expansion. These vibrations travel outward until they reach your eardrum, which begins to vibrate in response. The eardrum's motion is then translated back into signals, carried through your auditory nerves, and finally interpreted by your brain as sound. Notice that every medium in this chain, the brain, the nerves, the muscles, the keys, the strings, the air molecules, and the eardrum, possesses no energy of its own. Left alone, they remain still. So, where does the energy come from, and where does it go? The short answer: it comes from you, and it returns to you. The elements are the records of your thinking. They reflect and project back to you in kind. This is the meaning behind the saying, "Ask, and it shall be given." A smaller desire leads to smaller actions, which in turn produce smaller outcomes. These outcomes are registered in the lower, invisible octaves of nature. A greater desire, on the other hand, inspires greater action, leading to greater outcomes. These are registered through the higher octaves, visible elements. So, whether the desire is small or great, everything is recorded in nature's bookkeeping system.
Let that sink in.
And that's what this all about. Thank you for watching, and till next time.